When a narcissistic relationship ends, you're grieving multiple losses all at once. And some of these losses feel almost impossible to explain. Today, I want to talk about this unique and complex grief that comes with the end of a narcissistic relationship. Because this isn't ordinary heartbreak. This is something else entirely. The first thing you're grieving is the person you thought you knew. In the beginning, they seemed perfect, attentive, charming, everything you would ever want. They mirrored your values, they shared your dreams, and they made you feel seen in ways you never experienced before. But that person was a carefully constructed facade. The person you fell in love with was essentially a fictional character, created specifically to hook you. And when the mask finally slipped and you saw who they really were, you had to face the devastating truth. The person you loved never actually existed. It's heartbreaking. And it creates a unique kind of grief because you find yourself mourning someone who was never real. You're grieving phantom memories, phantom conversations, phantom moments of connection that felt so genuine at the time, but were actually calculated performances. How do you mourn someone who was never there to begin with? How do you process the loss of a fake love, what you thought was real love that you invested in and counted on? The second layer of grief is for the love itself. What you felt was real. Your love was genuine. It was deep and transformative. But their love, that was an illusion. You gave your heart fully, believing you were in a mutual exchange of affection and care. You made yourself vulnerable. You shared your deepest thoughts and fears and opened yourself completely. And you thought they were doing the same. But narcissists don't love the way others do. What felt like love to you was supply to them. Your adoration, your attention, your emotional energy. To them, these weren't cherished expressions of intimacy. They were fuel for their ego. So you're not just grieving the end of a relationship. You're grieving the discovery that what you experienced as the deepest love of your life was for them nothing more than a transaction. You're mourning the realization that you were loving someone who was incapable of loving you back. Then there's the grief for the relationship itself. The future you planned, the memories you treasured, the sense of partnership you thought you found. All of it built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. You believed you were building something together. You made compromises. You invested emotionally and even financially. You rearranged your life to accommodate this partnership. You saw a future with this person. You made plans. Maybe you made sacrifices for what you thought was your shared vision. But while you were building a relationship, they were running a con. Every sweet moment, every intimate conversation, every shared experience was tainted by their hidden agenda. The relationship you treasured existed only in your mind. This creates a very disorienting kind of grief because you're mourning something that simultaneously felt completely real and was completely fake. You're grieving a relationship, a love that was profound to you, but was ultimately just another day at the office for them. Perhaps the most painful grief of all is your own time, energy, and emotional investment. Months or years, and for some decades, of your life poured into someone who was never worthy of it. Countless hours spent trying to understand their behavior, excuse their treatment of you, and work on problems that were never meant to be solved. You gave them your best years, your deepest energy, your most genuine spirit. You probably defended them to friends and family who saw red flags that you couldn't see. You likely sacrificed opportunities, relationships, and parts of yourself trying to make things work with someone who was never going to reciprocate. And now you have to face the reality that all of that time and energy is gone. You can't get back the years you spent walking on eggshells, the emotional bandwidth you wasted on their manufactured BS, or the pieces of yourself you lost trying to be who they wanted you to be. This isn't just grief, it's a profound sense of theft. They didn't just break your heart. They stole your time, your energy, and often your sense of self. What makes this grief so complicated is that it's not socially recognized or understood. When someone's spouse dies, people bring casseroles and understand why you need time to heal. When someone experiences a normal breakup, friends rally around with ice cream and encouragement to get back out there. But when you're grieving a narcissistic relationship, people often don't understand why you can't just move on from someone who treated you so badly. They don't realize you're not just mourning the end of a relationship. You're mourning the death of your entire reality. You're also dealing with a secondary trauma of realizing how thoroughly you were deceived. It's not just heartbreak, it's a crisis of trust in your own judgment. If you could be so wrong about someone you were so close to, how can you trust yourself to see clearly in the future? So how do you heal from this kind of loss? First, you have to acknowledge that what you're experiencing is legitimate grief, and it's more complex than ordinary heartbreak. Be patient with yourself as you work through each layer of loss, and it goes pretty deep. Allow yourself to mourn the person you thought they were, even though that person never existed. Your feelings for the imaginary person were real to you at least, and they deserve to be grieved. Grieve the love you gave so freely, even though it wasn't returned in kind. That love was beautiful and pure, and the fact that it was wasted on the wrong person doesn't diminish its value. Mourn the relationship for the future you envisioned. Even though it was built on lies, your hopes and dreams were valid, even if they were never going to be fulfilled with this person. You will grieve the time and the energy that you lost, but recognize that you were operating with the information you had at the time. You weren't naive or stupid. You were loving and trusting, which are beautiful qualities that shouldn't be abandoned just because someone took advantage of them. I'm Grace Channing, and I am the author of a new book, soon to be released, about my life with a narcissist. And I can tell you from my own experience, healing from narcissistic abuse isn't just about getting over someone. It's about rebuilding your entire sense of reality after it's been systematically dismantled. It's about learning to trust yourself again after being gaslighted into doubting your own perceptions. The grief you're feeling is valid, it's necessary, and it's part of your healing journey. Don't let anyone rush you through it or minimize what you've been through. You're not just recovering from a breakup. You're recovering from a profound betrayal of trust and a theft of your authentic self. Take the time you need. Feel what you need to feel. And remember, on the other side of this grief is a version of yourself who is wiser, stronger, and more discerning than ever before. You will love again. But most importantly, you will love yourself enough to never accept counterfeit love as the real thing again. I hope this helps in some small way. I hope that you subscribe here and join me as we tackle the struggles of narcissistic abuse. We are just getting started here as we work together to find a life full of peace and joy.